The evidence arrived before she did. A manila envelope slid under the door at 11:47 p.m. I know because I'd been watching the gap of light beneath it the way you watch a wound. Inside, photographs. Names I recognized, dates I wished I didn't. Someone had been building a case for a long time, and they'd chosen me to receive it. I was still holding the third photograph when the knock came. 3 times, deliberate. The knock of someone who'd already decided there was no going back. Dangerous secrets, slow-burning tension, and 2 people who should know better, told in the voice of a man who never looks away. If you love this kind of stories, hit that subscribe button and tell me where you're watching from, because the next part might make you feel the thrill of being in love again, or maybe fill that brokenness you've been carrying. Either way, stay tuned. She was soaking when I opened the door, not caught in the rain soaking, walked through it soaking, the kind that takes commitment or desperation. And I'd learned long ago, those 2 things were usually the same. Her jacket was gone. A thin blouse, white once, now translucent with cold, clung to her like an afterthought. She was holding a second envelope, thicker than mine, pressed against her chest with both arms, the way someone holds the only thing left worth protecting. Her eyes found mine, then moved past me, clocked the room in 4 seconds flat. Table, window, second door. The find came back to me last, which told me everything about her training and nothing I wanted to know about her night. "You got the package," she said, not a question. Her voice was steadier than her hands. I stepped back. Let her in. Old habit, bad one. She crossed the threshold and stopped in the center of the room, dripping on concrete, not moving toward the heat or the chair or any of the things a person in from the cold would naturally move toward. She stood, like someone calculating distance, from the window, from the door, from me. I looked down at the photograph still in my hand. Third one, a man I'd worked for, shaking hands with a man I'd been paid to watch. Taken 14 months ago, 11 days before the op that had burned 6 of us to the ground. "You took these," I said. She didn't deny it. 14 months, she said, and 3 days. I set the photograph face down on the table. Outside, the city moved the way cities do at midnight, indifferent, continuous, loud enough to cover a lot of things you'd rather not hear. I'd chosen this building for that. The noise, the anonymity, the complete absence of anyone who might ask questions. I hadn't chosen it for the company. "How many people know you came here?" She looked at me then. Really looked, the kind that takes inventory rather than seeks connection. "If anyone knew," she said quietly, "I'd already be dead." The radiator ticked in the corner. I didn't move. Neither did she. The 2 envelopes sat on the table between us, and I had the distinct and unwelcome feeling that whatever I did next was going to cost me something I hadn't budgeted for. "You should take off your jacket," I said, then remembered. "You don't have one." Something moved across her face. Not quite a smile. The shadow of one. The memory of when things were different enough to smile about. "No," she said. "I don't." I found her a shirt in the bag I kept packed by the second door. Gray, worn soft, the kind of thing you stop noticing you own until someone else is holding it. I handed it across the space between us without closing it, and she took it the same way, arm extended, transaction complete, neither of us pretending it was anything other than survival logistics. She turned away to change. I turned toward the window. The city below moved through its midnight routines. A cab, a delivery truck, a man walking fast with his collar up. I watched without watching. With the glass gave me her reflection, pale and blurred, and I made a deliberate study of the street instead. Some lines, once crossed, rearranged the architecture of a room permanently. I had enough rearranged rooms. When she spoke, I was still watching the street. "His name is Voss," she said. "Deputy Director, 17 years. Clean record. Commendations, the full mythology." A pause. "Everything in that envelope says otherwise." I turned around. She was dressed now, her wet blouse folded neatly on the chair. Neatly, under these circumstances, that detail hit harder than it should have. "I know who Voss is," I said. "Then you know what he did to your operation." I knew. 14 months of knowing had worn a specific groove in me, the kind that doesn't heal so much as callous over. 6 operatives burned, 2 extracted in bad shape, 1 who didn't come back at all, and a report that cited field error so smoothly I'd almost believed it myself in the first weeks when I was still willing to believe things. "You were inside his office," I said. It wasn't a question either. The photographs were too clean, too positioned, someone with access, someone trusted. She sat down at the table without being invited, opened her envelope, and spread the contents in a careful line. Photographs, printed communications, a data drive the size of my thumbnail, organized, deliberate, the work of someone who'd been preparing for this moment long enough to stop being afraid of it. Well, almost stop. Her hands weren't steady. She'd stopped trying to hide it. "I've been his personal attaché for 11 months, she said. "My name is Mara Voss." She let that sit. Let me do the math. Yes, his daughter. The radiator ticked. Outside, the cab turned a corner and disappeared. I looked at the data drive, at the careful, precise line she'd made of the evidence against her own father, laid out on a scratched table in an unlisted building at 12:09 a.m. in February. "You should know," she said, very quietly, "that he'll figure out it was me by morning." The room felt smaller than it had 60 seconds ago. It would keep doing that. I made coffee, because the alternative was standing in the center of the room, cataloging everything that had just gone wrong. The kettle was loud. The silence underneath it was louder. She was still at the table when I set a cup in front of her. She looked at it the way people look at unexpected kindness. Briefly, carefully, as if checking it for cost. "You don't have to trust me," I said. "The evidence doesn't require it." "I know." She wrapped both hands around the cup. Her knuckles were scraped, right hand, 2 of them. I noticed. Filed it. Said nothing. "I chose you specifically because you have every reason to want him exposed. That's not trust. That's alignment of interests. Practical. I've been practical for 11 months. Something shifted in her voice on the last word. Just slightly, the way a wall shifts when what's behind it has been pressing long enough. It gets exhausting. I sat down across from her. Didn't touch the files. We'd get to the files. Right now, the files weren't the most important thing in the room, and we both knew it, and neither of us was going to say so. "The scrapes," I said. She looked at her hand. "Fire escape, 3rd floor. The building I'd been using is blown. I made it out with 90 seconds to spare. Flat delivery. Matter of fact." The tone of someone who'd already processed the fear and was now operating on the other side of it. "They weren't trying to take me in. The way they moved," she stopped. Chose her words. "They weren't bringing me home." The coffee steamed between us. I thought about the envelope under my door at 11:47. Whoever sent her knew my location, had known long enough to prep materials and plan an approach. Either she'd been surveilled leading here, which meant this address was already compromised, or she'd known where I was for some time and had chosen tonight specifically. "How long have you known where I was?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. 6 weeks. "And you waited." "I needed to be sure you'd open the door." I looked at her then. Really looked, the way I'd been carefully not doing since she walked in. She was watching me with the specific attention of someone who has spent months reading a person at a distance and is now recalibrating for proximity. There is a particular quality to being studied by someone intelligent. You feel it differently than being watched. "What made you sure?" I said. She glanced down at the files. "Back up." "You kept the photograph," she said. "The one from the Bucharest debrief. You kept it, which means you never stopped pulling on that thread." A pause. People who've let go don't keep photographs. The coffee had stopped steaming. Neither of us had touched it. She was right. I hadn't let go, and now she was sitting across from me at 1:17 a.m. with her father's crimes spread between us and fire escape scrapes on her knuckles, and the room kept getting smaller, and I kept letting it. She fell asleep at the table, but not completely. more like the half-collapse of someone who'd been running on controlled adrenaline for too many hours, and finally hit a wall. Her head dropped forward, caught herself. Did it again. The third time I pushed my chair back and said, "Take the bed," and she looked up with the momentary blankness of someone whose defenses had briefly clocked out. "I'm fine," she said. "You're not," I said. "Take the bed. I'll watch the door." A long pause, the kind where someone weighs the cost of accepting help against the cost of refusing it. "Wake me in 3 hours," she said finally. I would not be waking her in 3 hours. She took the back room without further argument, which told me how tired she actually was. Mara Voss, who'd clocked the exits before speaking, who'd kept her evidence pressed against her chest like a second heartbeat, who'd been living inside her father's operation for 11 months, collecting the rope to hang him with. She closed the door without checking the lock. That was the thing that stayed with me. She didn't check the lock. I sat by the window with her files spread across the table and worked through them the way I'd been trained to. Methodically, without reaction, cataloging rather than responding. The photographs first, 37 of them. Voss in rooms he shouldn't have been in, with people whose names appeared on lists I'd spent 3 years hoping were wrong. The communications second, printed in small, precise type. Each one dated, each one logged with a source code I'd need to decrypt. She'd been thorough. More than thorough. She'd been surgical, and she'd done it inside his house, inside his trust, for 11 months. I thought about what that cost. Living that close to a lie, performing love while building evidence, the specific weight of pretending. The data drive I left for last. Around 3 a.m., the building settled. The way old buildings do, a groan from somewhere structural, the pop of contracted metal. I looked toward the back room, silence. Then, the soft, even sound of someone genuinely, finally sleeping. I turned back to the window. The city at this hour was stripped to its essentials. A few lit windows, a siren, distant, moving away, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. She'd chosen me because of a photograph I'd kept. I thought about the 11 months she'd spent in her father's orbit, watching him, documenting him. And I thought about the expression on her face when she'd said it gets exhausting. Just that slight shift, that single unguarded moment. And I put it away carefully. The way you put away things you can't afford to take out again. The data drive sat on the table. I didn't touch it yet. Some things, once opened, don't close. She was awake before I heard her move, just suddenly present in the doorway, dressed, hair pulled back, the careful assembly of someone who does not allow themselves to be caught unprepared. She looked at the files spread across the table, then at me, then at the data drive, still untouched between us. "You didn't open it," she said. "Not yet." She crossed the room and sat down, picked up the drive, and turned it once between her fingers, the gesture of someone reacquainting themselves with something they'd carried a long time. "It has everything," she said. "The account transfers, the names of the assets he burned, deliberately. Not just your team, 3 others, 18 months of it." She set it down. "It also has recordings." I looked at her. "Voice recordings," she said. "From his home office, a pause, from dinners, from..." She stopped. Started differently. "I want you to understand that I recorded those conversations before I understood what I was hearing. The first time I realized what he was, I'd already been in his house for 6 weeks. I'd already had 100 dinners. I'd already..." Her jaw tightened. "The recordings exist. They're on the drive. That's all." The gray light moved slowly across the table. "I wanted to ask how you sit across from someone you love and record them. How you pass the salt, and ask about his week, and hold your face still while the device in your pocket is running." I didn't ask. I knew something about holding your face still. "There's something you should know about me," I said instead. She waited. That particular quality of attention again. Present, measuring, giving nothing away. "The Bucharest operation," I said. "I wasn't just a field lead. I was the one who recommended the team for the assignment. I chose those 6 people specifically. I signed the authorization. I kept my voice level. When the operation burned, when the report came back citing field error, I spent 4 months believing it. believing I'd made a mistake that got people killed. She didn't look away. "It wasn't your error," she said. "I know that now." The gray light had reached the edge of the files. But I knew their names. I knew who they were going home to. The one who didn't come back. His name was Garrett. He had a daughter. The room was very still. "I know," Mara said, quietly, the kind of quiet that carries information. I looked at her. She looked back at me. And for the first time, something moved through her expression that wasn't calculation or control, something older and more damaged and more real. "Garrett was my mother's brother," she said. "He's why I started. Before I even knew about the transfers, before the photographs, he's why I went in." The drive sat between us on the table. 18 months of collected truth, and underneath it, something I hadn't seen coming. A grief we'd both been carrying from the same source in different directions, and the particular terrible intimacy of realizing you are not as alone in a thing as you'd made yourself believe. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. The city outside began its morning. I opened the drive at 7. She sat across from me and said nothing while I worked through it. This is what I learned about Mara Voss in those 40 minutes. She understood when to let silence do the work. She didn't explain the files, or narrate them, or watch my face for reaction. She made more coffee and set a cup at my elbow and read something on her phone, low, eyes down, and let me sit inside the material without performance. The recordings were the last folder. I put my earphones in, pressed play on the first file. A dinner conversation. Date stamp 13 months ago. Voss's voice I recognized immediately. I'd sat across from him twice, been debriefed by him once. The other voice took me 4 minutes to place. And when I did, I sat back from the table and took the earphones out and looked at the ceiling for a moment. "Calloway," I said. "Yes," she said. Not surprised I'd gotten there. "Calloway is Voss's. Calloway has been running counterintelligence for the division for 9 years, she said. He's also been Voss's primary contact for the asset transfers. They've been careful. Not careful enough. Calloway, who had written the field error report, who had sat across from me in a gray office 3 weeks after Bucharest and expressed, with what I'd read as genuine regret, his conclusion that the operation's failure was procedural, who had shaken my hand afterward and said these things happen. I became aware that my jaw had tightened. I relaxed it deliberately. "How many people have seen this drive?" I said. "You're the first." She said it like it cost something, like the weight of being the only person carrying a thing had finally, partially, been transferred. "Why me specifically?" "The real reason." She set her phone down. "Because you're the only person with standing to bring this forward who Voss has no remaining leverage over. He burned your career. He took your team. He has nothing left to hold over you, which makes you the only person in the chain he can't stop." A pause. "And because I watched you for 6 weeks and I believe you'll finish it." I looked at her. She looked back steadily. The morning light was harder now, less forgiving than gray dawn, and she looked tired in it. Not defeated, not fragile, but worn through to something essential. 11 months of a specific and horrible kind of courage. "There's something else," I said, "on the drive. A folder you didn't mention." The steadiness in her expression held, but only just. "Yes, labeled with your name." The pause lasted exactly long enough to confirm what I'd suspected. "Yes, you want to tell me what's in it?" She picked up her coffee cup, set it down without drinking. "Not yet," she said. "Not until I have to." The building creaked above us, somewhere, a door, footsteps in the hall, moving past, continuing, both of us listening until they faded. The particular alertness of people who have learned to count footsteps. "Okay," I said, not pressing. "Not yet." But the folder with her name sat inside the drive like a door I'd seen and hadn't opened, and she knew I'd seen it. And we both understood the countdown on that silence had started. The phone buzzed at 9. No name. Just a 3-digit government prefix. The kind that only shows up when someone is using back-channel infrastructure. I let it ring twice before picking up, meeting his greeting with a silence I held like a weapon. "You're still alive," Voss said. He sounded calm, with the practiced detachment of a man who had traded in bad news for a lifetime. I wasn't entirely sure. Beside me, Mara went perfectly still. I didn't look at her. I just felt the shift in the room. "You're tracking this," I said. "I'm talking to you," he countered, his voice measured. "Let's keep it simple. Our interests overlap more than you think." "They don't, my daughter," he said it flatly. A heavy card played onto the table. "She's made a choice I'd like to undo before it becomes permanent. That's all this is." I stood and walked to the window. Below, the city was waking up. A woman walking her dog, a shopkeeper turning a key, entirely unaware of the conversation unfolding 4 floors up. "She brought me evidence of 17 months of stat-sanctioned murder," I said, my voice leveled to a flat, dangerous calm, "including the sabotage of my unit, including the death of Garrett Lowe. Mutual interests isn't how I'd phrase it." There was a brief, sharp silence. "Garrett was a complication," Voss said. "He was a man." Yeah, the word was hollow, a discarded shell. "But Mara is a person too, my person. She's young, she's angry, and she has no idea what she's holding, or what it's going to cost her to keep holding it." His voice dropped slightly, not in warmth, in precision. "She's on that drive too. You'll have seen the folder. Whatever she told you about why she's doing this, ask yourself what she didn't tell you." I turned from the window. Mara was standing now, both hands flat on the table, watching my face read the conversation. She could hear one side. It was enough. Her expression was controlled in the way of someone holding something fragile together through pure structural will. "I'm going to give you 1 hour, Voss said, "for old times. Then I'm going to make some calls. And the address you think is unlisted will stop being unlisted, and the conversation will change character significantly." He ended the call. The room was very quiet. "The folder," I said, "not an accusation, a fact." "Tell me now." She closed her eyes. 1 breath in, 1 breath out. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not broken, but changed, the way ice changes when it decides to go. "Before I went to work for him," she said, "I was approached by a foreign intelligence service. They knew what I suspected about my father. They offered resources, support, in exchange for—" She stopped. "In exchange for a secondary stream of the same intelligence. The photographs, the communications." Her voice was steady. Her hands, still flat on the table, were not. I said no. "I have documentation that I said no, but the contact happened, and it's on record, and if he releases it without context—" "It looks like you were working both sides," I said. "Yes. The folder with her name, the thing she hadn't been ready to tell me. The reason her father had said, 'Ask yourself what she didn't tell you,' with such precise confidence." "Were you," I asked, "working both sides?" "No, direct, immediate, and underneath it, something exhausted and raw and asking to be believed without being able to demand it." I looked at her for a long time. She let me look. "Okay," I said, "that's all." Her voice had something new in it. "We have an hour," I said. "Let's use it." We worked fast. I photographed every page of the physical files with a secondary device she hadn't seen me reach for. The kind of redundancy you build into a life structured around things going wrong. She didn't comment. She sorted while I photographed, creating a sequencing logic I recognized as trained, not improvised. "You have a handler," I said, not accusatory, informational. "Had." She aligned the 3rd stack. 18 months ago. 18 months before I went inside, I made contact with a woman named Reyes. She ran a quiet accountability office, adjacent to the Inspector General. Off ledger. "She's the one who told me to document everything." A pause. "Reyes died in March, ruled accidental, but not accidental. Her car went into a river. Mara kept her eyes on the files. She was the 3rd person who tried to build a case against Voss. The first 2 relocated. Reyes didn't get the option. I looked at the drive, at what was on it, at the woman across from me who had continued after her handler died, alone, inside her father's house, for 8 more months. "Why didn't you stop?" I said. She looked up. "Because Reyes had a daughter," she said simply. 16, same age I was when my mother died. A beat. You don't stop. The room did what rooms do when something true is said inside them. It absorbed it. The traffic outside continued. The building continued. Everything continued except the particular quality of the air, which had changed. I sealed the photographs onto the secondary device, encrypted it using a key she didn't have, which was not a statement of distrust but of operational discipline. If we were separated, the redundancy had to be genuinely separate. There's a man named Varga, I said. He runs a documentation archive outside the division's jurisdiction. We get the drive to him. The photographs, the communications, he'll sit on it, she said. Varga is risk-averse. He'll want corroborating testimony. Yes, I said. Which means you'll have to give it. She'd known this was coming. The way she received it told me she'd been deciding how to feel about it for some time. If I give testimony, she said, the foreign contact becomes part of the formal record, regardless of context. Yes, it could, depending on who reviews it. Yes, I said again. It could. She nodded once, slowly. The nod of someone accepting a cost they've calculated and are choosing anyway. There's something I should tell you, I said. She looked up. I believe you. I said it the way you say things you mean, but can't afford to make large, quiet, level, matter of fact. About the foreign contact. I believe you said no. A pause. I want you to know that, before we walk out of here. The something that moved through her face then was not gratitude exactly. It was older and more complicated than gratitude. It was the expression of someone who had been waiting, without admitting they were waiting, for something precise and had stopped expecting it. She looked back at the files, straightened a stack that didn't need straightening. Thank you, she said, very quietly. 40 minutes left. We kept working. But the room had shifted again, and we both knew it, and neither of us was going to be the one to name it. We left at 10:14, the building's rear exit, the one not visible from the street approach Foss's people would use. I'd mapped 4 routes to Varga's contact point when I'd first established the safe house, the kind of habit that looks like paranoia until it doesn't. She walked beside me, and not behind me, which I noticed, which meant something about how she was thinking about what we were now. Not the same thing we'd been at midnight. Not adversarial, not quite something else yet. The specific in-between of people who have spent 9 hours in a serious situation and come out changed in a direction neither has named. Varga's intermediary was a woman named Solis. She met us in the car park at 11, with a gray coat and no expression, and took the drive and the photographs with the efficiency of someone for whom this was just another Tuesday. She looked at Mara once, carefully. You understand what you're signing, Solis said. It wasn't quite a question. Yes, Mara said. The testimony will take several days to process, during which time you cannot return to your previous residence, your previous contacts, or any location associated with your father's network. Solis glanced at me. She'll need somewhere to be. I said nothing. Mara said nothing. Solis handed me a phone. Varga will call this number tonight. Have her ready. And she was gone. Heels on concrete, car door, engine, away. We stood in the car park. The city moved around us, ordinary and enormous, entirely unconcerned with what had just been set in motion. Somewhere to be, Mara said. You can use the safe house, I said. Until Varga's call. She looked at me sideways. You don't have to. I know. I started walking. She fell into step. You've been making sure I know that since you knocked on my door. A pause. Then, very quietly, something happened at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. The same shadow I'd seen in the first hour, but closer to the surface now. Less guarded. You opened the door anyway, she said. Bad habit, I said. We walked another half-block in silence. The cold had let up slightly. A degree, maybe 2, the kind of concession February makes reluctantly and takes back without notice. After Varga's call, she said. After the testimony. What happens to you? What do you mean? Voss burned your career. You've spent 14 months building toward this. After it lands. She stopped walking. I stopped too, because that's what you do. We were at the corner of two streets I won't name, the city at full mid-morning volume around us, and she was looking at me with the direct, careful attention I'd stopped trying to be unaffected by somewhere around 5 a.m. What do you do after? I thought about it. Actually thought about it, which surprised me. Usually that question produced nothing but a gray space I'd gotten practiced at not examining. I don't know, I said. It was the most honest thing I'd said in 14 months. She nodded slowly, like that answer meant something. Me either, she said. We stood there for a moment, two people at a corner, in February, with 17 months of collected truth now in other hands, and a telephone call coming tonight, and no clear map of the country on the other side of this. It was almost comfortable. That was the part that scared me. Varga called at 8:22. 12 minutes. He asked her 4 questions in a voice like a file drawer. She answered each one without hesitation, and at the end, he said the materials were sufficient and the process would begin within 72 hours. Then he thanked her in the specific, impersonal way of institutions that run on documents, and ended the call. She set the phone on the table and sat for a moment without speaking. I didn't rush it. That's it then, she said finally. That's it. She looked at the table, the empty surface where the files had been, the clean space that 9 hours ago had been covered in the architecture of her father's crimes. It doesn't feel the way I thought it would. It rarely does. How does it feel to you? She looked up. I thought about Garrett. About 6 names I still knew in the order I'd written them, on an authorization form 14 months ago. About the gray office, where a man had shaken my hand and expressed careful regret and told me these things happen. Like something finished, I said. Not like something healed. She held that, turned it. Is there a difference? Yes, I said. Finished means done. Healed means repaired. I met her eyes. Some things finish without repairing. She was quiet for a moment. The city outside moved toward dark, the light going amber and then gray at the window. The radiator had found a rhythm. The room had a different quality than it had at midnight, less compressed, less sharp. Still small, smaller maybe, in a way that had stopped feeling like a problem. I should tell you something, she said. You've been telling me things all day. This one is different. She folded her hands on the table. The careful, deliberate gesture of someone choosing honesty over strategy, maybe for the first time in 11 months. When I was watching you, the 6 weeks before I came, I told myself it was operational, that I was assessing whether you were the right person to receive this. A pause. That was true. It was also not the whole truth. I waited. You kept the photograph, she said again. The one from Bucharest. I'd been told you were closed off, finished, that you'd walked away and were done. She looked at the window. But you kept it, and I kept. She stopped, started again. I kept watching longer than I needed to. The room was very still. I had several things I could have said, careful things, operational things, things that would have maintained the appropriate distance and been correct and meant nothing. I know, I said instead. She looked at me. I know you kept watching, I said. No one finds an unlisted address in 6 weeks without motivation to keep looking. I held her gaze. I told myself it was important to understand who'd sent the envelope, that I was being thorough. The corner of her mouth, that shadow again, and this time it completed itself. Briefly, fully, a real smile, and it changed her face entirely, and I understood with absolute clarity why I'd been trying not to see it directly. Were you, she said, being thorough? No, I said. She kissed me, or I kissed her, in the years after. Whenever it came up, and it did, neither of us could agree on who moved first, and that felt right. That felt like the truth of it. 2 people, who had both been waiting, neither willing to name it, and then the waiting simply ended. I won't tell you what that cost us. Some prices aren't anyone else's business. What I will tell you is this. She stayed through Varga's process, through the testimony, the 72 hours, the formal proceedings that dismantled 17 years of careful architecture with the cold efficiency of documented truth. Voss resigned before charges were filed, the kind of exit that institutions arrange for their own comfort. Calloway was less fortunate. The folder with her name became part of the record. The foreign contact, the refusal, the documentation she'd kept, reviewed, assessed, and cleared in the end, but it was a long week before the end arrived. I was there for the long week. She didn't ask me to be. That was the part that mattered. After, on a Thursday in late March, when the city had remembered it was capable of warmth, she asked me again what I would do now that it was finished. I looked at her, she looked back. That direct, careful attention I had long since stopped trying to be unaffected by, and had stopped wanting to be. Something, I said. I'll figure it out, together or separately. I thought about a cabin I'd once used, about a knock at 2:14 a.m., about the specific and terrible gravity between two people who should stay away from each other. What do you think? I said. She thought about it, seriously, the way she thought about everything. Together, she said. Probably, I could work with probably. After 14 months of nothing, probably felt like a door swinging open in the dark. And this time, for the first time in a long time, I wasn't standing behind it alone.